Now, if it were an end-of-term report, the conclusion would undoubtedly have been could do better. In international tests, Britain's 15-year-olds failed to reach the top 20 in maths, reading or science. Despite big increases in educational spending, there's been no improvement over the last 4 years, a period in which East Asian countries have powered ahead. In a moment, we'll look at what's going wrong. But first, Fatima Manji has this.
Britain's children are just average. That's the grade from the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development. 15 years on from Tony Blair's mantra, education, 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 and our schools are apparently in stagnation. The OECD won't say which schools took part in their testing, so I took some of their questions to a group of 15-year-olds myself. Around the world, more than 500,000 pupils took the test. In the UK, students scored average, meaning we didn't even make it into the top 20. How was it?
It was good, yeah.
So, why do we think the UK was only average then?
I think that, Britain as a whole is quite comfortable with where they are, economically. So I think that the whole country just kind of seems as if, well, school is free. You go to school because you have to. You don't go to school to learn. You don't go to school because you want to learn.
Yeah, maybe Asian countries might have a bit of thirst for knowledge than the UK countries. Maybe they want to be better than their parents. You know how parents want their child to be better than them.
So the politicians are quite worried about this. Are you worried?
Some people need to be pushed, to do their best, and some people can't be pushed anymore because if you're pushing them beyond what they can take, they can break down and just not do well. They even do worse overall.
So where in the world are students performing the best? Well, the test is broken down into 3 categories: maths, reading and science. And you can see the top performing countries behind me there in each category. Now, it's quite clear East Asian countries are faring well. In fact, the only country to appear in the top list that's not in the region is Finland. But overall, across the board, number 1 in all categories is Shanghai in China. But this isn't just about the UK lagging behind globally. Within the country, Wales has the lowest results. In maths, it was ranked 43rd out of 65 countries. Today's results reflect tests taken last year. The government sees this as evidence Labour's education policy failed to deliver.
The terrible truth about the situation that we face in our schools is that Labour does not have a strong record to defend, and it does not have a strong policy to advance. That is why this coalition government is committed to reform.
But are these tests a fair measure? Critics say the questions vary too much across countries, and some schools just don't care about the rankings.
We are very much more adept at judging ourselves, I would say, now with the new Ofsted frameworks that is much more supportive than having a global test that places us in a slightly random position.
Fair or not, these test results are being used to back educational reform. And the results so far must try harder.
Fatima Manji reporting, whilst the UK's poor performance compared to Asia is the most eye-catching part of today's report, what's perhaps more worrying is how countries across the world are catching up with Britain. And if their students are increasingly better educated, how long will it be before their economies overtake ours as well? We'll shortly be debating the issues with the politicians. But first, here's our economics editor, Faisal Islam. Faisal.
John, so we aren't bottom of the class, but this troubling survey suggests the performance of British education is stagnating. The urgent question is whether it's not just our students, but also our growth and our standards of living that will be left behind as other countries improve their standards. And this isn't just about China and East Asia. Let's look at our performance, say, against Poland in science. 6 years ago, UK pupils scored 515 points out of a possible 800 in a series of science questions. Polish students managed 498 points, clearly behind us then. Today's survey shows the UK standing still, but Polish students now score 526 points, so dramatically overtaking us. For maths, the lesson's the same. Go back 6 years and British pupils are neck and neck with Polish ones. Again, we've stood still, but Polish students have shot ahead. One for the future, perhaps. Turkey. The latest reading figures show a sharp catch-up. UK students scoring 499 points now and Turkish students managing 475. So we're still ahead, but that lead has halved in the last 6 years. Countries that we might have foolishly dismissed as still developing rapidly catching up in the education stakes as British teenagers seem to languish. Ireland too is now ahead of the UK in maths, reading and science, a clean sweep for the first time. But back to that comparison with East Asia. It's not just that Singapore, Hong Kong, Korea, along with China, were already streets ahead in numeracy, reading and science. It's that the lead has been stretched even further over the past 3 years. Typically, a 15-year-old in Singapore, Hong Kong or Korea is a year ahead of a British teenager at reading. For maths, the gap is up to 2 years. Why? Well, it can't be explained by spending differences or school structures. Perhaps it's how much different societies value education. After the last result like this, the Education Department sent some teachers to China to observe. Tom Murphy was one.
In China, no one would ever say, oh, I can't do maths. But it seems to be something here which people are proud of being able to say. Over there, they would say, I find it difficult, so I'm going to work harder so I can become good at it. And I think that's a key cultural difference. There are other things we can learn as well. For example, the teachers in China teach fewer lessons, fewer classes, get to know individual students far better, far more responsive to individual needs, and also are given opportunities to collaborate on a much deeper level.
So consider this, in urban China, 15-year-olds have the standard of maths of an 18-year-old here in Britain. And remember that these tests were for 15-year-olds born in 1997, the children of Tony Blair and his mantra of education, education, education. So if we are in a global race and the government believes we are, then we're well off the top of the class, John. We're losing.